As usual, takes a few moments to get set up to all our accounts. So once we do, we'll get started with the episode. In the meantime, we'll look in the chat for any questions you have for our guest today, and we can answer them towards the end of the podcast. So stick tight for a few more seconds till we sync up to all our networks. Okay, one more left, and then we'll get started. Okay, here we go. Welcome back to Coach Connect. Here's where we explore the stories and strategies from insights and trailblazers who are transforming the world of coaching and well-being. What drives their success and what fuels their passion for helping others. We're going to uncover their secrets and share them with you. This show is brought to you by Vibely.io, the all-in-one coaching platform to empower coaches with tools, resources, and support they need to thrive and help their clients achieve meaningful, long-lasting growth. I'm Dr. Diego Salinas, your guide on this journey. As a neuroscientist, physician, and health coach, and co-founder of Vibely, I'm committed to celebrating the incredible work of coaches everywhere and helping them unlock their full potential. So together, let's dive in deep to what makes coaching a powerful force of change. Today's guest, Dr. Justin James Kennedy, is a recognized expert and thought leader in behavioral neuroscience. As a professor with academic positions in Switzerland and London, he supervises PhD candidates and conducts influential research on neuroplasticity and its applications in organizational development. He's a certified Harvard University neuroscience expert and published author in the Harvard Business Review, specializing in the intersection of neuroscience and organizational performance. The master neuroplastician. His role as executive academic coach, he empowers leaders and organizations to leverage neuroplasticity to drive transformation, improve decision making, and enhance leadership effectiveness. As a compelling TED speaker, researcher, PhD supervisor, Dr. Kennedy is the author of The Brain Reboot, a powerful storyteller in this book that recounts his journey from surviving a coma to becoming a professor. His work is in applied neurosciences shaping the future of leadership and organizational dynamics through deeper understanding of the brain. For more information, visit npninstitute.com, npnhub.com, professorkennedy.com. Justin Kennedy, such an honor having you on the show today.
It's so cool to be here, Diego. Your channel is so vibrant. It's so, maybe I should say it's so vibely, but it's really nice to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, so Dr. Justin, so usually we start the episode by kind of doing a little background, what got you started into this realm. So I kind of briefly read through your bio, but what got you started in your fashion of neuroscience and then coach and helping others? You can give us a little bit of your journey to where you got today.
Well, I wish I could tell you, but you have to first read the book, Diego. I mean, I'm making light of it because it's a bit of a tragic story, and it started out with me having a road accident and a traumatic brain injury that led into a subdural hemorrhage, which then caused you know a coma, and then obviously that after that I was a bit traumatized, to say the least, and the recovery was slow, but the journey led me into saying, what's going on or not what's going on in my brain. And I had to fall out of my studies to be a psychologist because obviously I wasn't functional enough. But I did, as my brain came back online. I'll tell you what the process was as it came back online, and it's an interesting internal perspective. But as I started to notice it coming back online, I realized that there is something not going on. And
Mm,
that got me interested in understanding the process of neuroplasticity, and and the rest is history, as they say in the movies. No, the rest isn't history at all. The rest is just the beginning, and that's how I got into the research around neuroplasticity, Diego.
yeah. But I mean, what an incredible story. And yes, definitely read the book for those who are interested. And I would say maybe let's
I
define the
mean,
term
actually, before you
neuroplasticity.
carry on, Diego, I've got a gift for your listeners, to give them a copy of the book, because it is. I mean, the first chapter is really well written because it was edited properly, and the rest of the book I really went off on on a circus tribe, which is fun as well. But the first chapter is really bestseller quality. But the rest of it, I'm all over the place. But it was a fun book to write, and it was, one of those books you want to get off your chest or out your head. So I'll happily give you and your listeners a copy if that's a nice gift for you guys.
Oh, that's very generous of you, Justin, and what a really tremendous thank you. And I think it kind of speaks to you taking your internal story and really helping us with it. I think it's a commonality between coaches. They have some sort of journey, and they realize there's something more here, and how can I take my experience, learn more, and help others with it too. So first of all, thank you for that generous gift and offering. And I think it speaks to what you're trying to do in the field, really amplify what neuroplasticity is and how people can change. Maybe, Justin, if you don't mind, let's define neuroplasticity for our listeners who aren't maybe neuro nerds like you and I, right? So how would you just define to someone who's never heard what neuroplasticity, what that word means?
How much depth should I get into here, Diego? Should I give you the should I give you the neuro nerdy answer? Should I give you the coaching answer? What kind of answer should I give?
Could we maybe do both? I had a attending in medical school. He said things need to know, nice to know, nuts to know. Maybe the need to know and nice to know. Maybe the coaching answer and the neuro nerd answer, if you don't mind.
Okay, so I mean the coaching answer is through neuroplasticity. Brains shows it has ability to change, adapt, recognize, reorganize, form new neural pathways throughout our life. It doesn't stop when we're babies, it carries on. And this is how the brain rewires itself in response to learning, to experience, to memories, and obviously in my case, in relationship to injury. But it's not only traumatic neuroplasticity, there is positive neuroplasticity, which is the kind of stuff that coaches do to facilitate behavior change. So as a behavioral neuroscientist, I'm equally, if not more, interested in the behavior change that happens through those insights, through that learning, through those epiphanies, through those aha moments that come in a coaching relationship and that comes out of knowing how it works. So as you know, as well as everybody, that every thought or action has an activation, and that often has an emotional function, and that has a direct link into the neural networks. And these networks, when they are repeatedly used, grow stronger and stronger. I'm from South Africa. For those who recognize the accent, from South Africa or Canada, half of Canada is South African these days. But there is an old there's an old story about these buffalo that go down to the watering hole every day, and after generations and generations, they carve a very deep groove into the mountain as they go down the pathway. And one day, one young bull notices, there's actually a shorter route. He can save himself, maybe a couple of miles out of going a new road. And he's, off he goes, and he takes this new pathway, which he starts to make his own. And he gets down to the watering hole maybe 15, 20 minutes before the rest of the group. And every day he goes down the same route. Only one or two more buffaloes follow him, and then by the end of the season, all the buffalo follow him. But it takes a long time for the new pathway, even though it's better. It takes a lot longer for that groove, that pathway to become as robust and as strong as the old one. So it takes time to build neuroplasticity. You can get neuroplasticity to be triggered, but it takes a bit more time than just having an aha moment. This is where coaching comes in so importantly, especially with behavior change around emotional contagion. There is so much noise around emotion in the brain, and to shift those old emotional habits is, it takes a lot more than one little buffalo. You need to really build the groove. Eh?
Yeah, Justin, that metaphor really rings true to me as well, and I think you're referring to the Hebron hypothesis there, right? Neurons that fire
Yes,
together wire
indeed,
together.
indeed.
Yeah, yeah, and so to your point, I think before people thought neuroplasticity or change was something you see in kids. Their brains are constantly changing, learning, but we're always changing and learning every time there's something new, and we often notice
Mm.
change, something traumatic happen quickly, but change can be good, post-traumatic distress or growth. And that analogy you mentioned, the buffalo, I'll be honest with you, Justin, I had that experience during pandemic a little bit. I lived behind a forest, and I'm giving a talk next week on this. And so those who be in San Diego will see some of this lecture slides there. But it was pandemic, and I wanted to go on more hikes, and so I was like, let me make some trails in this little forest path. Well, there was no trails there, so went to Home Depot, got a machete, and yeah, at first it takes a lot of energy, right? And so the thing is that creating these new paths like a buffalo, even if you want to go down that, initially takes a lot of energy when the idea is there. And so I think a lot of people think
Mm.
motivation, well, I'm going to go to a motivational talk, go to a weekend lecture, hear someone tell their story, and then that's going to change my life. I say that's more inspiration rather than motivation, right? And
Or
to your
even
point, you might have a,
or even perspiration. You really need to sweat it out. In the neuroscience literature, it's very clear that there's structural plasticity, there's functional plasticity, but it's pretty much all experience dependent plasticity, which causes those long-term changes through learning, practice, and repetition. You can go to a Tony Robbins event and he's rock and roll. I mean, who doesn't love what he does? But you need to go home as well, and then to put on your running shoes or put on your new emotional cloak. And this is where coaching I found so useful for myself, uh, Diego. When I was recovering from the coma, it is so difficult, and finding that why it matters. Maybe I'm quoting Simon Sinek here unconsciously, but the neuroplasticity. So I became obsessed with my recovery. I became obsessed with my one leg being paralyzed, and it became like my whole thing. And I like wanted to get my legs working again because I was a marathon runner before then, so clearly it was something important to me. And finding why it matters was so important. But the funny thing, well, funny, but the surprising thing was that every time I tried to walk, I would get frustrated, which would end up me being angry or break into a pile of tears. And what worked so well was a health coach who I was friends with, who really facilitated me to being aware of those emotional pollution, as we called it, getting in the
mm,
way of me finding out what I can do to train my brain, to heal my heart so that I could get my legs to start. And it was a really it was
nice
a it
rhyme.
was a really it was a really beautiful experience. And if we dive into the science of it, Diego, can I go down the science road? Can I get lost in the library with you for a bit?
Let's do it, please. Let's start out. That's my favorite thing to do. So let's go.
Okay,
Our
let's
listeners are
learn
hungry
about
for
it.
more
But
neuroscience talk. So let's
when
do it.
we look at the core mechanisms of plasticity at the heart or at the core of neuroplasticity is that ability of synapses and the junctions basically to build higher frequency of electrochemical activity. And what happens in that space, we're looking for LTP, which is, as you would know as well as any neuroscientist, that's that long-term potentiation. And when we see that LTP, we see that high frequency of stimulation. And this kind of stuff is very interesting, specifically as it relates to the hippocampus. As you know, that's
Hmm.
where memories are like to hang out. And learning and memory is kind of linked pretty well. So, long-term potentiation as also like the opposite of LTP, long-term depression, which is the kind
Hmm.
of state that my brain was in, because it was the weakening of these synapses, the ability to get my brain to move my legs, to control my emotions. It really wasn't working. But there is this bilateral, I don't know if the word is collaboration or synchronization, it doesn't matter, but it's this neural coding that happens through learning. And I think that is so important. I'll stop there before I get lost down neurotransmitters or molecular modeling. But it's interesting
No,
to see LTP and LTD protocols, especially when it comes to neurotransmitters, and how that influences behavior change through the activation or the lack thereof.
no, it's let's go down a little rabbit hole more. I'll do a little maybe translations for some people here, if you don't mind, Justin. I'll try
Good.
to, how can we explain to audiences, right? So along this, I think there's such a power in learning the neuroscience of behavior change, for those who are coaches in the audience or clients, right? Because I think it's really important saying that this is a science-based approach. We're not just throwing advice out there. And this Heaven hypothesis in LTP, LDP, kind of we're saying that synapses are the space between neurons, right? So these neurons make these circuits and they connect to each other often through electrochemical synapses. Some are junctions, but most are electrochemical synapses. And when you see neurons that are working together, creating new groups, new circuits, that buffalo that was creating new circuits, or the one that I was doing in North Carolina. And just I'll continue my analogy in North Carolina here. Let me know what you think. So first day, a lot of energy, right? Machete, go through it. The more I did it though, then I realized like a few days later, I saw little hoof prints on the track I'd made. Other animals were starting to use that same pathway.
Oh, no way. No way.
Right. And then one day I tied my shoe and I realized there's little pathways for like rodents or smaller animals that I'm not looking at. My perspective up here being 6'2" versus little animals. And then it started raining, and the rain and the water would erode this pathway more. Right. So the
Mm,
idea that it's at first any new behavior, anything takes a long time. But what the brain is really good at is learning or making these patterns. And then because it spends a lot of energy to do it, and later on it's very energy efficient to run down the pathway. So if you take this
exactly.
metaphor, right, creating a little road, first, let's take in the States, interstate 95 goes from Miami to Maine, right? I would say, think about how many man hours it must have taken to go from coast to coast to pave that. You can drive it in a day and a half, right? So the brain, so I think when people make change, I get frustrated about change. We all have emotions about it, right? We want it to be quicker. But I think if you understand that literally just takes time for the physical properties to change, right? The neuron has to create new proteins go from the nucleus, make sRNA, send those receptors to the cell surface so they're more sensitive. The other cells that aren't neurons also help these synapses get closer together, protect the space. There's a building process happening in a microscopic level. So if we just allow time for this process to go, that's where where the connections happen. That long-term potentiation, right? It's much easier to go on this pathway. The other thing you're saying, Justin, is that if these roads aren't used for a long time, I say, what happens to roads that are abandoned? They start cracking, right? The roots start taking
Mm,
back over. So the brain has a mechanism to both create new roads and help prune old roads. And I think as we're making change, I'm gonna step back and talk about little kids for a second. So I did pediatrics. I rollerblade as a fun hobby. I started doing the pandemic again. People ask me, well, what if you fall? And I said, listen, you fell when you learn to walk. It takes humans years to reliably walk
don't
well,
fall.
right? Like, I wish I could say that, Sid. I wish I could say don't fall. But it takes humans years to reliably walk well, right? Kids at 1 year olds are taking their first steps, but until they're 4 or 5, their knees are full of bruises and cuts. Right. And so, but
Mm,
little kids just don't give up. They keep on going. I think adults, we forget once we're good at a skill set, we forget how long it took to build that skill set. I'll pause there before I get lost in a
yeah.
rabbit hole as well, actually, because I
I mean,
can go deep here.
I want to get lost in the roads for a second. Just after I was recovering from the coma and in the therapy that followed, um, someone said, "Have you heard of Maguire's study with London taxi drivers?" And this is a pretty like world famous study now. You probably come across it, right? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And just for those who don't know the study, that McGuire and their team looked at the enlargement of the posterior, I think it was a posterior hippocampus related to navigational experience. Basically, the London taxi drivers had an enlarged hippocampus, basically a spatial memory, by having to learn, which they call the book or whatever. It doesn't really, I can't remember what it was called, but basically it shows that the skill builds really big pathways. And musicians have it as well, the somatosensory motor cortex regions building trained fingers. But for the emotions, which I find extremely interesting, is how this has been validated looking at Richardson's work, David Richardson's work around mindfulness, and how cortical thickness is associated with attention and interoception. I love that word, and I love the word neuroception, which we can nerd out on that in a
Ooh.
minute as well. But but it's really showing that if you do it, you get it, and your brain makes that easier and easier, because you get to learn how to cruise on your blades, Diego.
I love that. Yeah, and it goes to the point that, like, someone told me this one time. If you see a human do it, you can do it too, right? The brain is, I think it's really remarkable, is that it can adapt to do so many skill sets if it gives it time, right? You could be a really good at doing yoga or juggling, or playing an instrument, right? To the point of the instrument, Justin, I remember I've been playing guitar since I was 13. I don't play very often now, a few times a week kind of thing. But when I was young in high school, it was every day at home. I wanted to play like my idols, right? And to the point, you can see a concert and be inspired. I still to go home and spend hours using one hand to move the other finger to make G chord or to do the D minor chord. Eventually it starts clicking, right? Eventually you don't have to think about it as much. And when I then 20 years later try to learn the keyboard, I was like, oh, this takes so long. It was so frustrating because of this experience. But I say from an energy perspective, brains kind of has two really main functions, right? Keep us alive and save energy. Saving energy is kind of part of that. And so the brain will try to spend energy saying, if we're doing this every day, tying our shoes or typing, might as well put a little energy into it so that it becomes easier later on to do it. And so I tell my clients, during discovery call, people are looking to work with me. I often ask them kind of a little tongue in cheek. I say, hey, do you have any bad habits? And they'll start saying, yeah. I go, okay, good. If you have bad habits, we can work together. Because if you have bad habits, that tells me the same neurologic mechanism that can create good habits. Your brain just does habits. And to me, they either serve you or don't serve you, right? So versus being good or bad, for example, maybe your study skills in high school didn't serve you when you went to grad school, right? Whether good or bad, they have to adapt. So I think to me, it's like that anything that's learned is a circuit, and that we can have, if you can do bad habits, quote unquote, or ones that don't serve you, we can take that power to create good ones. But it does take a lot of energy initially, and as long as we're willing to put it in consistent, we will get the results in the long term.
I love this. In order to de-geek the science, I was working with a PhD candidate, Diego, and they said, you speak about these neurotransmitters and you speak about what the brain is doing. And I said, now, can't you make it more user-friendly? And I said, dude, you don't need to learn Latin, but you do need to learn a bit about neurotransmission. And they said, okay, what do I need to learn? I said, well, the first thing is glutamate. What glutamate wires together, that's what fires together. So as you know, glutamate is the brain's primary excitatory neurotransmitter. So I always say learn at least two neurotransmitters when you're a coach: glutamate and GABA. Glutamate being the master synaptic change, the primary driver of change, and GABA being that that inhibitory, doesn't controls the balancing and the and the settling down. So what we did, and we got really carried away with a bunch of PhD candidates, we built a coaching tool called neurostarter.com. Did I send you to the page of it, Diego?
You and I sent it, but we haven't discussed on this podcast yet. So let's
Anyway,
go. I like where you're going with this. So
go
please
have.
go
I
ahead and
mean,
describe
we'd
it.
love to and tell everybody on the channel. Look at
Yes.
neurostarter.com. There's actually a coaching pack on the back, but it's a free app that you can download on your phone or whatever, and you can learn about the key neurotransmitters that are associated with behavior change. And it starts out with using a body scan and the role of dopamine and serotonin. It's acetylcholine, norepinephrine. Let me stop talking for a bit. But what we try to do with it is making the neuroscience coach friendly, so that it is something that we can look at on how to facilitate behavior change so that we can sustain wellness habits. Because I believe, and I'm sure you'd agree with me, that if you haven't got your health in check, nothing else is going to stick. That's a quote. I'm going to claim it. I'm going to claim,
Like it.
if you
I
haven't
like
got
it.
the health in check, no other habits are going to stick. So,
Yeah.
this is a way of
Just
understanding it neurologically.
so for everyone listening, I just put the link NeuroStarter in the LinkedIn chat right now, so you can check it out in the meantime. And yes, please check it out. And I think Justin, really appreciate what you're doing for the community of both giving information and to our clients. I think if they know that we know this, that builds trust, right? We're not just giving, my advice to friends. Like there's some science behind this. And the interesting part of the neuroscience is each brain is still different, right? 100 billion neurons, 10 trillion synapses. They're all slightly different day by day. So where do we start, right? But each person has to understand what lights them up, right? What is their fuel? And being able to, I think, talk about the brain with the activation and depression, right? The kind of the gas pedal brakes. I say your brain's like a Ferrari, really powerful engine, but without good brakes, you're going to go off the rails. So a big part of our brain is controlling that, understanding our emotion regulation, for example, and turning, I heard the phrase emotions or energy in motion. How do we make these emotions not block us, but actually turn them into something that's activating? And the last point you said too is that, you know, maybe another way of paraphrasing what we said is health is real wealth. That someone asked at a conference one time, Justin, what do you think of that? Someone said, Dr. Diego, what's the difference between mental health and physical health? And I looked up and I was like, there's no difference. And my analogy is to make it simple, to de-geek it, is that all our bodies in the same sack of skin. Yeah, we have the blood-brain barrier, but it's one bag of skin, right? It's all mental health and ocular health. It's all one system. We learn it in parts. It's easier to understand, conceptualize, but it's not that the brain and body aren't connected, right? It's all in the same bag. Now there's sub bags, etc. So I tell people, especially no matter what you're working on, if you're feeling stuck, if you can work on any other part of the system, that's going to help your brain function. So if you're feeling stuck, do you need to sleep more? Do you need to exercise to move? You know how more movement helps with neuroplasticity or mindfulness of those neural connections, right? So really, I'm glad we're talking about this part of the system. It's a very important part of it, but it is one system that works together.
Oh God, we could get lost in so many conversations. I think health is your wealth, and if people say what is the most important component of health, maybe I should ask you what your opinion is as well as mine. But I looked at, this was very much part of my research because this was obviously important to me, and I published some work on this. I'll give you the textbook chapters if you want to read. You want your listeners to geek out on some science. But I looked at what are the core components of wellness and health and well-being, and I came down to about 5 or 6. I think it was 5, about looking at the importance of sleep. And I thought sleep, that's really the most important. Then I looked at nutrition. I thought, wow, of course, nutrition is going to, fuel or not fuel brain. Then I looked at exercise. I thought, oh, God, must be exercise. I mean, that, you don't move. If you don't skate, you're going to get your problems going. And then I thought, maybe it's actually about affective well-being and emotions, because if you don't have your amygdala in the right gear, you're not going to be able to concentrate or do anything else. And then I thought, maybe it's more about energy, or having experiences in the wilderness and having that sense of awe. And then I settled on the most important part, because I think this is it, is that not having social connection is the most important one. And, of course, you've got to eat right and sleep right, etc., and have, an emotional well-being. But the research that I was reading shows that, it comes down to having that community. And, we're both on the same page. Vibely is that great content and context. And our work at the NPN Hub is kind of saying the same thing. So our collaboration is so important, because we know that during COVID, people got depressed. I mean, it's no secret why. Social isolation, is pretty lethal. I mean, this is why you get into isolation in prison, because it's a pretty depressing, stressful thing to do. So when it comes to health and well-being, social well-being is top of the pops.
Justin, obviously, I agree with you. And I gave a talk summer at a coaching conference. It was more executive coaches, but then they had some more health and well-being in there. And I brought this up, and I try to simplify it to 4 pillars at least. I think yours was more robust, but I was like, yes, we got to sleep well, right? Our brain needs sleep. We got to eat. It's our fuel for our body. So look at your body. Everything on there you ate at one point is because you ate it, right? Yes, we have to move, right? So moving the body moves the mind. Everyone says, by the way, when I skate, it's so good for your body. I'm like, my body benefits, but I do it because my mind feels great afterwards. I don't do it for this. I do it for this part of the system, right?
Exactly. It's very meditative to do it, for sure.
Exactly.
And
Some of
no
those
and
things
no
are
and no
some
and no
actually.
joint stress, which is even more important.
Yeah, and actually, to me, some of those things aren't dissimilar to mindfulness, right? So a lot of these balance sports require mind. They force you to be present. You can't be thinking about an email when looking at a rock that might throw me off my balance a few feet apart of me, right? So there's some
Hmm.
overlap in how these things work. But I was saying these things are really powerful, but the most powerful is connection, right? So if you had to choose one, right? If you look at what's the Harvard study, right, on longevity, the biggest predictor of longevity is the perceived quality of social connections. Right? And if you look at the
Nice.
blue zones, I see all these, and I'm not be careful how I say this. There's a lot of longevity medicine coming out and all these things, red light therapy and IV this, IV that. And I'm not saying there's not research to be done and explored, but people in the blue zones, they don't do red light therapy and IV infusions. They walk to lunch with their friends and eat the foods and walk back, right? And so,
Yeah.
so
I mean,
now
I've
the
got to
same,
tell you a quick story. This is
please.
such a beautiful story. So at the moment, we're living in Croatia, and hopefully forever. I've got to go back to Europe anyway. We're in Europe now, but to Germany. But we're in a our house is right on the ocean, but there's a little road, and every morning at like 4 or 5 a.m. we hear this little tractor coming past, and this tractor's it's the size of I don't know, it's the size of a desk. It's a really small desk, and this old farmer comes past every morning with his little chuk 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 little tractor, and he goes up the road and he feeds his sheep and he checks his olive trees, and he does what farmers do. And then by the time we wake up, which is maybe like 8 or so, he's coming back from work, so he's already finished his day. And whenever I hear him, I run out onto the balcony, and I wave to him, and I show him how much olive oil we got left. And then he knows that if I go like this, then he must drop up some more olive oil when he comes past again. But this guy, I mean, he's in his 80s, and he's incredibly healthy. He was born deaf, so he speaks Croatian. I just nod and I say yes, whatever he's doing, and my wife can understand him. But we have the most beautiful conversations and about nothing. It's just about that social connection of someone who is living the good life, and being in an environment where that is easier is always social. You can't do this life alone, and I can't stress that enough, Diego.
Justin, no, it's you paint a beautiful picture there. I have family in Italy, and same thing. Actually, why I moved to South Beach is that the the it's a pedestrian area. I walk out my dog, and when I go down Lincoln Road, they know my dog. They give them a little treat, right? The little micro socializations, right? So there's like
Nice.
those community, those deep friends, and perceived quality. And there are times I'm like, oh, stressed out. I go for a walk around sunset. I'm like, oh, it'll be okay, and then have the energy to put back into it. And I think, Justin, this, you know, while I think it's the most powerful one, I think also we should address it's maybe the most difficult one because it's not only dependent on us, right? So from behavior perspective, to make I've had clients work on connection and communication as part of their goals, right? So it's like, well, what behavior can we do to put ourselves in situations that we can meet others and see if we do connect well, right? So and if you look also for the I think this also talks about people right now coaching are AI, right? AI is going to replace human coaching. How I see is AI coaching is not the same as human coaching. They're complementary goods, but they're not supplementary goods. AI is fantastic for lots of things, organizing. But after you and I have a talk, Justin, I always leave the call like with energy and like the feeling lingers on. Think about if you've ever gone on a date. If it's a good date, you're happy the next day. It's a bad day, you're kind of in bad mood, right? Human connections not only have energy in the moment, but they have lingering effects. When I close ChatGPT, I'm not really like thinking about how it's feeling about me, right? And to
It's
not
probably it's
to maybe
probably not. It's probably not.
right? And to demystify that part a little more, I say, look, we can look at fMRI studies, but simplify it. If you're in a room by yourself and someone walks in, someone you know, don't know, like, hate, do you feel the same or different? You feel different, right? So it's a very powerful tool human connections can have. And so to me, to not use that for behavior change is to
The
really
most
throw out a
important thing
powerful.
that AI is never going to be able to do, it's never going to be able to be human because it's too good. And we don't want perfect. We want to see people failing and struggling, and we want to see the hero's journey, and we want to be part of that, and we want to facilitate. And this is what coaching is all about. It's about being on that journey with your client as they find the solutions, they build the habits, they come over those emotional obstacles, and they come to a point of insight, or they come to a point of I don't know, you know what I mean? It's just like that. It's like that epiphany, and that's what we coaches want. We want to be part of that journey. And I promise you, AI really doesn't give a shit. It doesn't. It's not programmed to give a shit, and that's fine. And there are some really cool tools. And I mean, there's actually a Joe Rogan. I hope you know who Joe Rogan is. But
Yeah.
Joe Rogan on his podcast was speaking about AI and how it can basically do anything. And he was saying to the AI expert on the channel, can it? And he picked up this sculpture off his desk, and he said, "Can AI make this sculpture?" And he said, "Yes, it could probably make it better." And Joe Rogan says, "But I don't want it to be better. I want it to be handcrafted. I want it to have that human connection." And the guy said, "Well, we can build it in." And Joe said, "Even if you can build it in, it won't resonate." And we are in a place where the human condition it's become an asset. It's become something
Yes.
that we really want. We need to feel connected. And the reasons that we have built the NPN hub is the same as why Vibely exists, is because people need people on the same page. We need people to do the same work with us. We need to be in a tribe. We need to be in a community that gets us. And that's the journey, isn't it? Huh?
You gave me goosebumps, Justin. Yeah, it's about tribe, right? And it makes sense. It's hardwired into us, our survival, right? We survive as human beings because of social cooperation, right? We saw, okay, what if we build a fence together and you take a night shift, I take a day shift, and we're not getting eaten by tigers, right? We survive those who work together, not because we're stronger as a single person, but we're stronger as a community and society. And to your point about coaching and us, witnessing people going through this journey, when I teach, often inevitable, someone will ask me, "Well, Diego, how can I be a coach if I also struggle with X, Y, and Z? could I be a good
And
coach?
with
Which
the best
I struggle
coach.
with. And you'll be a better coach because you understand that change is really difficult and it's not linear. And people just want that human connection is such an important part of that getting back up, that failing forward. We're gonna fall. The kids fall, they're 1 year old, but
Love
they
it.
keep on getting up and trying again. And collaboration creates such a motivation that's so hardwired in us, right? To not use that. And I think if you look at medical history also, Justin, there have been plenty of times we try to replace human connection with automations, or right, or in medicine, or even technology in recent history, right? And some of these things will hijack those circuits, right? Social media hijacks that because you think you get a dopamine hit from liking a video, but then it's like an empty calorie. After you close, you feel empty and worse inside, right? So nothing can replace your connection because it's so unique. And maybe the last thing I'll say here is I had a client one time and she was working on meeting more people actually. She's like, I want to meet more people. Someone I met here. She's like, I see you're by yourself with your dog. You see someone comfortable. How can I do more of that? Like, we can work on anything. Let's work on this. And so we settled upon her task was to do one thing by herself a day. It could be grab coffee and sit there by herself. Just be more exposed. She goes, oh, you know what? I want to take more pictures. I used to do photography. I could do one picture a day. And then she started talking. She goes, oh, but I realized she's perfectionistic, right? She's like, well, it's a good picture. I said, your goal was to one picture a day, first of all, not the perfect picture a day. But then we went a little deeper and I said, what does the arts do? The arts reflect humanity, right? They help us get to the human condition. Songs, yeah, pictures, movies. It's reflecting some form of the human condition. And the human condition is sloppy. Our friend says, we're sloppy stardust, right? So the art that reflects it is going to be equally non-perfect, so it makes it so human. To your point, and if things are actually too perfect, if you take an AI, make the face perfectly symmetrical, there's a name for this right now that's escaping me. It weirds us out because we realize this is not human, and that's kind of freaky.
It's that uncanny valley, I think they call it, when it's kind of close
There
but
you go.
just off a bit. And yeah,
There you
it
go.
gives everybody the shivers when you see that naked mannequin in the window looking almost right. But it's
Yeah.
all about, coaching is all about failing forward and being on that journey together. And maybe Marshall Goldsmith's work and about failing forward in his coaching. And he was going to a conference for a person that I knew, and I said, "Hey, dude, is there any way that I can meet him? I'm writing this book, and I think it would be so cool if he could be involved, and he could help me a bit on the book." So he said, "No, his guy's too busy, won't get a chance to have a chat with him." So I said to him, "How's he getting back to the airport?" So he said, "He's going in the taxi or whatever." I said, "Can I travel with him?" Going to
Nice.
the he said, well, I suppose I can ask him. And Marshall and I had the best conversation, and he said, don't try to call your book something about mine, give it your own brand, call it Brain Reboot, and fail forward in the writing. Don't give up. It's your first book. You just keep working at it, and in failing forward we get to have that sense of wellness, by improving our physical or emotional. It's the hurdles that we get over. What is the quote? You probably know it. It's not the destination, it's the journey. How does it
It's a
go?
journey.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think you
it's
said it
the
right.
journey, not the
Exactly.
destination. And
Yeah.
that's the human condition. We're not looking for answers, we're looking for experiences. And we're looking for an experience where there's a social experience.
Yeah. You just said something that whatever sports we do are things that kind of get in our flow states, and we can maybe another episode talk about flow states and the neuroscience there and all the beautiful neurotransmitter release that
Right.
we're getting during these flow states, optimization, and the nice mix of every one of them just being the right level. So flow states, right? We've all experienced it. Something we enjoy feeling. Time is dilated. We're in the zone, right? And so for me, and the thing about flow states is that they require skill set, right? So sometimes my students are saying, "Hey, I'm not
Mm.
flowing yet." I go, "Yeah, I can't flow the first time I play guitar. I have to play for a long time to get skill to be in that zone, right?" So, I was at one point working on this role playing technique about stability with for marathon skating and stuff. And I had the voice instructor in my head, kind of watching these YouTube videos while I was doing it. I was like, "Okay, stable hips, stable hips." And I thought, my hips are stable. That means my knees and ankles are really doing a lot. And the body, homeostasis is a kind of funny um, oxymoron, right? We're constantly adjusting to keep our body temperature relatively similar, right? We're
Right.
constantly breathing differently to keep our pH 7.4 plus or minus 0.05, right? But then it dawned on me that stability is not an outcome, it's a process. We don't achieve stability and we're done. It's a process of maintaining it, or
Mm.
balance, right? I think we think of balance, whether it's physical or emotional, when we're losing balance. But you and I are balancing right now, right? You don't
Mm.
think about it when it's not a problem. So I think it's a beautiful point that maybe people, at least when I was younger, I thought, oh, the happily ever after, get to where you need to go, and then life will be cruising. But it is the
Mm.
journey, and we have to do it together. We're wired for that. And speaking of
Mm.
that, maybe Justin, with some time left, about 10 minutes left here, we both build these communities and want to help others. And I'd love to learn, you tell the audience more about, because you have multiple different communities. I put the Neuro Starter there, but really, I'm really appreciating how you're bringing neuroscience and neuroplasticity into the coaching community. Could you mind sharing a little about the Neuroplastician credential you've created and some of the
Right.
learning
I
opportunities you've
mean,
created?
you can see me all sitting up and getting excited because what we, I've been a coach since last century, which is giving a lot of age away. And what we found, and I'm sure you find a lot, is that people say neuro this and neuro that without really knowing anything other than a couple of Latin phrases at best. And
Mm,
with a PhD candidate, he said, it's not really neuroscience, it's neuroplasticity, as I mentioned before. And he said, if it's neuroplasticity and we've got coaches that are helping clients to build neuroplasticity, why don't we start a discipline? So I said, okay, why not? He said, why don't we look at neuroplasticity and how coaches can facilitate it and look at how to be someone who facilitates neuroplasticity as a neuroplastician. Diego, we went Bollywood. I can't resist. We went proper. We built an advisory board. We got some of the thinkers in neuroplasticity engaged in this environment. We built out the competencies. Marsha Reynolds has got involved. Paul Zach has joined the team. You have been such a great supporter as well. So we've built out this whole credential, not a training program, but a credential as an award of effective application of neuroplasticity-based interventions or tools. So you don't have to be a specific kind of person or specific kind of coach, but you need to know what is going on in the neuroplasticity and apply neuroplasticity-based tools so that when you are speaking to a client, you are sure that your interventions are facilitating neuroplasticity rather than simply counseling or simply just hanging out with them, which there is a place for that, of course, but in a coaching space, you're facilitating change, and all change starts and hopefully continues in the brain. So the neuroplastician credential now exists. There is a directory of hundreds and hundreds of neuroplasticians. We really want your graduates and your community to join this because we think it is so important to draw a fence around what is and isn't effective application of, of neuroplasticity-based interventions. And we've built this community of just so many people who want to just hang out and learn and share and talk. We have a book club. We have roundtables. We have people inventing and writing books and building apps and starting companies and having conversations just like this, Diego. So it really is a vibrant environment. And we're really interested in making sure that your tools are available inside the hub. So we really need to get cracking on that because I've mentioned your name a couple of times and now the drum roll's going, dude. We need to get that going. In fact, I think we have something set up. November 19th. Yes, November 19th. You're doing a presentation for us about burnout, or is that right? What is it about?
Yeah, the neuroscience of burnout, right? And how
Yeah,
to
that's
decide
right.
symptoms, but also how to deal with that at individual level. And as someone who's gone through that, research is research, right? And so, Justin, I want to say it's
Mm,
I just had a little flashback. You mentioned almost a century ago. I had a flashback to being in my Neuro 101 class at Brown in 2004, and I'm like, and look where I am now. Where I am now, the community. Back then, all professors said, you know what? No one of us are neuroscientists. It's a fairly new field. We're all biologists, chemists, physicians,
mm,
physicists, computer scientists, and the multidisciplinary approach the field is having. And it's still so much things to learn, which excites me, right? And so
mm.
I'm really excited for all our collaborations and for all the Value members. Stay tuned. Dr. Justin and his team has been very gracious to do some lectures for us as well on more neuroplasticity and coaching. And we'll talk about more of the app and our upcoming things that we're, kind of drumming up in the background. I'm really honored to be speaking to your community as well and being part of this advisory board. But really, I think this parallel approach, how can we let people know that coaches and clients, this is neuroscience in action. To me, I've found really it builds that layer of trust and patience that people can have to go through the energy of making those new patterns, right? Because I think if you
Mm.
know, think about going to college. If you know that in 4 years you get a degree, you'll stick through it for 4 years, right? If there's this indefinite, when am I going to graduate? You might stop for a year, right? And so knowing that what you're doing
Mm.
is effective, and then I think what coaching does really nicely is it puts the individual into the science, right? You're the N of one here,
I
all
love
right,
it. I love it.
right? Because every brain has amygdala, values, and drivers, but what drives me may not be what drives someone else. But we all have drivers, right? What frustrates me may not frustrate someone else. We all have things that frustrate us or slow us down. So if we understand conceptually how the brain, how we think it might process things, but then let each person apply their own unique. What is that value? For me, it's collaboration. For some people, it's competition, right? It's what is those unique drivers, and then learn. I say we're helping teach people to be the mechanics of their own brain, right? As a passenger, I can see if your hood is smoking. If hey, there's smoke coming from the engine. But when you're driving the car, you feel vibrations earlier on, or you see the check engine light before everyone else does, right? So I think coaching really help people become their own mechanics of whatever their brain is, whether their brain's a car, an airplane, a submarine. I say if you're a submarine, swim low. If you're an airplane, fly high. Don't worry, your friends do. You have to figure out your own unique circuits and how to change them.
I could get lost in the conversation. We need to hang out more often. I can't wait for you to you to join in community events and have this conversation. The, the hope, Diego, is that we're really going to collaborate and bring practical neuroscience into coaching. And um, a lot of neuroscience still is about explaining the brain, which fair enough, there's obviously logic and benefit on that. But I'm really interested in making sure that how did you phrase it? You said putting the science into coaching or putting the brain into the coaching. You said something like that, and I think that is it was a really well phrased little quote, and it's about making coaching a science. And if we understand what is the brain is doing as a result of this protocol, we can then tell our clients, look, this is what's going to happen during your coaching process. We're going to start out in the beginning with it being a little bit uncomfortable. There's going to be some stress in the beginning as we start to help you uncover the things that need to be addressed. And then it's going to be an uphill battle where that cortisol is definitely going to be dosing up. And as we get to milestones and as we get over the dopamine hills of benefit and reward, you'll then start seeing that we are getting outcomes together through behavior change. And as that triggers, then you will then get that serotonin kick of well-being by being that success. And most important is my favorite neurotransmitter of the moment is oxytocin, when you're getting that felt connection with others. And that's what it's
Yeah.
about, Diego. If,
Yeah.
if we explain to our clients, this is the journey and this is what's going to happen to your brain as we go through it. it makes it more fun,
Mm.
because there's nothing more fun than science. It makes it more fun because you can actually track what you're doing
Yeah.
in the process. And we've got some really good partners in the NPN hub who are, are offering some really good technology where we can track these neurotransmitters, where we can look at activities. Sorry, I can get lost into the functions of what we're doing here. But at the end of the day, coaching is growing up, and I think we
Mm.
will. I think we will see the maturity of the industry. It's already happening in health and wellness coaching. So power up to to health and wellness coaching. It's really impressive what's happening in that space.
Justin, I agree with you. We could have a much longer conversation, and we will have you back on for sure, and definitely our community events. So, unfortunately, we're at the top of the hour, so we're going to start winding
Can you
down. But
believe an
I want to
hour went by? Huh?
time dilation, right? Time flies when you're having fun. We're in the flow state.
Mm,
And these connections. I want
exactly.
to thank you, Justin, not only from Violet, but also me personally. These are really enriching conversations that the community's been asking a lot for. So thank you for spending time, kind of showing us a little sneak peek of all you're working on. We'll have all the links on the bottom episode. Please check out the sites, and stay tuned for our collaboration between Vibely and NPN Hub. And for any of our listeners who are looking to join Viably as a coach, if you put podcast 20, you get a 20% off the next 3 months of service. Dr. Justin, thank you so much for what you did today, all the groundwork you laid for the field, and what's coming up ahead for the future.
Exciting times ahead, my friend. Thank you for having me on your fantastic channel.
Thank you, everyone. Take care, and we'll see everyone next week. Bye bye.
Bye bye.